I worked the night shift at St. Clair's Hospital in the ICU. It was about 3 months ago. I was 32, trying to save money for my younger sister's college. I was used to the long hours and quiet halls, but I couldn't shake off the strange things that happened during those nights. I set up my station with the usual equipment. The fluorescent lights above me flickered sometimes, casting odd shadows on the walls. Around midnight, I thought it was just another shift. I was tired but figured it was normal. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something move in the hallway. An empty wheelchair rolled way too slowly away from my station. It wasn't supposed to be there. I guess I stared at it too long. My heart started racing. Was it a draft? Maybe the old building just had its quirks. I wanted to convince myself it wasn't real, but I felt uneasy. I stood up and walked closer. The wheelchair stopped suddenly, almost like it knew I was there. I looked around, but the hallway was empty. The next night, I was in the same spot when I heard something. It was faint, but it sounded like crying. I wasn't sure where it came from. It felt like it echoed around me. I stood outside a storage room nobody was supposed to use. The sobbing stopped. Just silence. My hand hesitated on the door handle. I pushed it open. Inside, there were shelves filled with old supplies. I felt a chill run down my spine. Maybe I was just tired. As the nights went on, weirder things kept happening. My coworker Sarah mentioned she saw a figure at the end of the hall. I wanted to brush it off. But you could tell she was scared, like something was watching us. Shadows flickered behind us. When I turned around, nobody was there. The hair on the back of my neck felt prickly. One night, just as I was about to take a break, cold air rushed past me. It made me shiver. Then I heard a whisper my name. Megan. I know it sounds crazy, but I turned, and there was nobody there. My heart was pounding. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake from. I still replay those nights in my head. Were they just lack of sleep, or was something truly there? I keep glancing at the hallway, hoping for some kind of explanation. I would lie down at night, still hearing that sobbing echo in my mind. Then, one last thing happened. While cleaning up, I passed the storage room again. I swear I heard someone call my name again. I spun around quickly, but there was nothing. Just darkness. I felt my breath catch in my throat. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting, hidden in the shadows. Each night, it became harder to separate what was real and what wasn't. I didn't know how to make sense of it all, but I kept on going. I arrived at St. Clair's for another night shift, my nerves already on edge. It felt different this time, heavier. I kept replaying that whisper in my head, Megan. It was surreal, but part of me hoped for an explanation. As my shift began, I tried to block out the memories and focus on my tasks. I checked monitors and organized supplies. The usual beeping filled the room, interrupted occasionally by the distant sound of footsteps. Each time, I turned, half expecting to see something or someone. The hallway stayed empty. After a few hours, during a slow moment, I decided to check on Sarah. We often took a break together to ease the tension. I found her in the break room, her eyes wide. She looked pale. Megan, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I saw it again. What did you see? I asked, tension twisting in my stomach. By the nurse's station. Just, a figure. It was watching us. She looked around, almost daring the shadows to prove her wrong. I wanted to comfort her and tell her there was nothing. But I couldn't shake my own unease. Maybe it's just the lighting or your imagination, I suggested. The place can mess with your head after a while. She shook her head vigorously. No. It felt real. Like it was, waiting for something. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and a shiver ran down my spine. "Let us just take our break somewhere else," I said, hoping to lighten the mood. But her stare followed me, her worry unspent. As we walked back to our stations, the unease thickened in the air. The hospital felt different, alive in a way that unsettled me. I decided to walk down to that storage room again. If something was making my coworkers uneasy, I needed to see for myself. The cold air hit me as I approached the door. I hesitated, just like before, but this time my heart demanded action. I turned the handle and stepped inside. As I scanned the room, my eyes landed on something unexpected: a dusty old box tucked in the far corner. My gut tightened. I pulled it out and opened it. Inside were papers and photographs. Most were faded, yellowed with age. Instantly, I felt claustrophobic, as though the walls were closing in. I leafed through the documents. It looked like a patient file. It didn't make sense. The name wasn't familiar, but a single photograph caught my eye. It was of a child, maybe 6 or 7, with sad, haunted eyes. My stomach dropped as I turned the picture over. There, written in shaky script, were the words, "Promise I won't be alone." Then I heard it. The sobbing, like a distant echo. It sent chills through me. I clenched my jaw, heart racing. I needed to confront whatever this was. The rational part of me wanted to dismiss it, but the other part, the part that had felt the icy air and heard the whispers, urged me to dig deeper. Just then, the lights went out. Total darkness surrounded me. I felt a rush of panic as I tried to find my way back to the door. My hands trembled. "Hello?" I called out, voice shaking. No response. The sobbing grew louder, almost as if it were right next to me. Then everything changed when I felt something brush against my arm. That was it. I was done. I needed to find Sarah, but I didn't even know where she was. It felt like the shadows were closing in, waiting to reveal their secrets. And I wasn't sure I wanted to know what would come next. I stumbled back toward the door, heart pounding. Each step felt like a mile. I cursed under my breath for not staying with Sarah. I was alone, really alone inside this dark room, and that sobbing felt too real. I finally grasped the door handle, my breath shallow and quick. The sobbing faded slightly, but it was still echoing in my mind. I yanked the door open and stepped into the hallway. The hospital looked the same, but the shadows seemed to dance differently under the emergency lights. "Sarah!" I called, urgency lacing my voice. I turned right and headed toward the nurse's station. Maybe she had gone there after I left her in the break room. But my footsteps echoed back at me, devoid of her reply. I walked faster, glancing into every room and corner. Anxiety gripped my chest. It had to be a trick of the mind, but the air felt heavy, like an impending storm. I reached the nurse's station, but it was empty. "Sarah!" I shouted again. Just then, a soft whimper trickled from the nearby patient room. My heart raced as I approached the door, pausing just before pushing it open. Was it another echo of that child's sobbing? Or something else entirely? I wished I had more light, more courage, anything to pierce the strangeness. "Hello?" I ventured into the room. It was dark, the curtains drawn tight. A figure moved slightly in the bed, a shadow against the stark white sheets. "Is someone in here?" Then I heard it, louder, soft crying mixed with something else, like a low moan. Dread washed over me, but I stepped closer. My hand reached for the light switch, hesitating. If I turned the light on, what would I find? Before I could decide, the figure on the bed stirred. "Help me," a small voice whimpered. My heart dropped at the sound, raw and filled with despair. Was this the same child from the photograph? I switched the light on, and the glare cut through the darkness. My breath caught in my throat. The bed was empty, but the sheets were crumpled, as if someone had been there just seconds before. I scanned the room frantically. Nothing. Just the echo of that child's voice still hanging in the air. I felt dizzy, unsure of what was real and what was part of my imagination. I needed to find Sarah. I turned and rushed back into the hallway, my thoughts racing. Where could she be? The sense of urgency pulsated within me. I dashed toward the break room, but the door was ajar. It was then that I noticed something on the floor just inside, something white, crumpled. I bent down and picked it up. It was a piece of paper, folded. My hands shook as I unfolded it. The words were shaky, almost frantic. "It's not safe. Do not trust it." Just then, a loud clatter echoed down the hallway, causing me to jump. It sounded like it came from the storage room where I found the box. My instincts screamed for me to leave, but something pulled me back. I had to know what was happening, had to understand what was unfolding around me. Against all common sense, I started toward the noise. Whatever was waiting in those shadows had a grip on me, and I couldn't walk away. I hesitated at the entrance to the storage room, the door slightly ajar. The sound of something falling again echoed in the silence, a metallic thud followed by a smaller clatter. It struck me that whatever had made that noise could be hiding just inside, and the unsettling feeling in my gut told me it wasn't anything benign. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open, wincing as it creaked. The dim light barely illuminated the stacks of supplies crammed into the room. I scanned the area and noticed glints of silver here and there, scissors, trays, and what looked like an old, rusted surgical tool. I took a cautious step inside. "Sarah?" I called out, my voice barely a whisper. No response. I crept forward, listening intently, each sound amplified in the stillness. I had to be brave. If I didn't find Sarah soon, I might regret it. Then, from the back corner, I heard a faint whimper. My heart raced again. "Sarah?" I dared to step deeper into the room. The unsettling atmosphere weighed down on me, and every shadow seemed to pulse with an unseen threat. I reached for the light switch, but my fingers trembled too much to be sure of my aim. As I shuffled forward, I caught a glimpse of something moving, a dark figure shifting behind the tall stack of boxes and equipment. Panic shot through me as I froze. "Is someone there?" I shouted, trying to keep my voice steady. A few more steps and I stumbled over something at my feet. I looked down to find a discarded patient folder, its contents scattered. I bent down to pick it up, but tinted crimson caught my eye. A blood-soaked bandage lay on the floor next to it. My breath quickened, and the heaviness in the room became suffocating. That's when I saw it. A small door at the back of the storage room, ajar just enough for me to notice. It didn't lead to the hospital floor. The metal frame was dusty and lost in shadows. My heart sank. I could feel it calling to me, begging me to look inside. Something shifted behind me. The faintest rustle of movement. I turned quickly, adrenaline surging through my veins. "Who's there?" I barked, my voice strained and shaky. No reply. Just silence, thick and pressing. Then I saw a flicker of movement again, closer this time. I stepped back instinctively, my foot nudging a tray of instruments, sending them clattering to the floor. The noise reverberated through the storage room, almost mocking my fear. "Sarah!" I yelled, desperation leaking into my tone. My pulse hammered in my ears. I needed to escape this tension, this feeling that eyes were watching me from the darkness. Just as I turned to bolt for the exit, the small door swung open. A figure emerged, shrouded in darkness, a familiar face partially obscured. My heart dropped. Was it Sarah? Or was it something else entirely? As I grasped the doorway for support, they raised a hand, fingers stained red. "You shouldn't have come here," they warned, their voice barely above a whisper, sending a cold shiver down my spine. All my instincts screamed for me to run, but I was rooted to the spot, staring into the shadow. I needed an answer, but what I got was a chilling reminder that I was far from safe. What did that figure know? And what had happened to Sarah? I was certain the figure was Sarah, but something in their voice made me hesitate. I squinted into the dim light, trying to discern the familiar features. The way they stood there, tension radiating from them, didn't sit right with me. Sarah? I asked again, trying to hold on to hope. What happened to you? The figure didn't answer. Instead, they shifted their weight from foot to foot, as if caught between wanting to step forward and a paralyzing fear of staying. With the faint light playing tricks on my mind, I squinted harder, straining to see past the shadows. What do you mean I shouldn't have come here? I pressed, panic creeping into my voice. I took a cautious step forward, and there it was again, the glimmer of something metallic on their hand, a jagged edge that was difficult to make out. It's not safe, the figure finally said, their voice quaking. They glanced over their shoulder as if expecting someone to emerge from the darkness behind them. You need to leave now. Before he comes back. My heart dropped at the mention of he. Who was he? I forced myself to look deeper into their face, attempting to bridge the gap of uncertainty. If you're really Sarah, you have to tell me what is going on. But the words fell flat in the oppressive silence. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed outside of the storage room, jolting us both. I jumped, adrenaline coursing through me as I turned instinctively towards the noise. My heart raced more at the thought that a threat might be lurking beyond the edge of the door. Stay quiet, the figure whispered urgently. We can't let him hear us. Just then, the air thickened with an ominous presence. It felt like we were being watched. My instincts screamed at me to run, but I was paralyzed. What do you mean? I asked, my voice trembling. Who do you mean? What are you hiding from? Before they could reply, the small door behind them swung wider, revealing a pitch-black space. I could hear muffled sounds, a sharp gasp, then a low, guttural noise that made me shudder. I reached for my instincts, but they twisted my gut instead, urging me to flee. Get back! The figure suddenly warned, throwing themselves against me as if to shield me from whatever was about to emerge. My heart pounded, and I fumbled for the doorknob. If I could just make it out, I could escape this nightmare. But as I pushed at the door, it resisted, seemingly stuck. My pulse thundered in my ears. The figure's grip tightened on my arm, and with a mix of desperation and fear in their eyes, they muttered, "We need to go. Now." With one last push, I forced the door opened wider, but the sight that greeted us froze my blood. A shadowy figure loomed at the entrance of the room, a taller silhouette, blocking our exit. I could see their outline shifting, and as they stepped into the light, recognition set me on fire. This was someone I knew. His eyes glinted with malice. You really should have listened, he said, a chilling smile creeping across his face as he took a menacing step forward. In that moment, I understood. I had entered a nightmare I couldn't wake up from, and the worst was yet to come. I tried to back away, but something in me told me there was no escape. The figure moved closer, and the familiarity of his features sent a wave of nausea through me. It was Jake, a former friend turned sour after a fallout we never fully resolved. But his eyes were different now, dark and hungry, as if they relished the fear in the air. Why are you here? I managed to ask, my voice a whisper against the growing tension. Oh, you know, he said, his tone dripping with mockery. Just checking in on old friends. But you shouldn't have come snooping around where you don't belong. Sarah needs help, I pleaded, glancing at the figure beside me. Their face was pale, anxiety etched across their features. They shook their heads slightly, as if to urge me not to engage further. Jake laughed, a low sound that sent chills down my spine. Help? She's already in too deep. You should have stayed away while you had the chance. The shadows danced behind him, and I felt the weight of something looming. It was becoming clear that this wasn't merely a confrontation, it was a trap. I could see it in the way Sarah flinched at every sound, her body wound tight as if preparing for a fight that wasn't ours to engage in. "We can leave together," I offered desperately, glancing back at the door. "We can no." Sarah's voice cut through the air sharply, a fierce note of resolve that surprised me. "You have to run." Not before she could finish, Jake lunged toward us. I pulled back instinctively, but he was faster, closing the distance. "You think she cares about you?" he sneered, reaching for me. I ducked and felt a rush of cool air as I sidestepped, the ghost of his fingers barely grazing my shoulder. Adrenaline pumped through me as I pushed past him, shoving Sarah in front of me. We needed to get out, away from whatever darkness he brought into this space. I pulled her hand, but the moment felt heavy, almost as if Jake was weaving a spell around us. "Don't let him get into your head," Sarah said, her eyes wide with panic. "He wants to isolate you, just like he did to me." But I was already moving toward the door, adrenaline cutting through the fog of confusion. I pulled again at the knob, my mind frantically searching for a way to pry it open. It stuck. I yelled over my shoulder, and I could hear Jake chuckling behind me, his amusement slicing through my anxiety. "Let us see how far you get," he taunted, the promise of violence lacing his words. "Help me," I shouted to Sarah, and she lunged toward the door, helping me twist the knob with all of her strength. Gritting my teeth, I threw my weight into the door, and it finally gave way with a sharp creak, swinging open to the hall beyond. But before we could step out, I heard a voice, a whisper that curled like smoke in the corners of my mind. "You can't escape him." I hesitated, just long enough to turn back. Jake's expression had changed. Behind him, in the shadows, something flickered, an unnatural movement that promised something worse than either of us could face. I could feel it in my gut. Then everything went dark as the lights above flickered out, plunging us into absolute darkness. "Run!" Sarah yelled, and the urgency pierced through the fear choking me. Together, we stumbled into the pitch-black hallway, ready to face whatever was hunting us. I grabbed Sarah's hand as we rushed into the hallway. The darkness was overwhelming, but I focused on the feel of her grip, grounding me amid the chaos. The air was thick, suffocating, and I could hear the sound of our hurried breaths echoing off the walls, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was looming behind us. "Left or right?" I asked, my voice barely a murmur. "Right. There's an exit down there," she replied, her words carrying a note of hope and fear that mixed in a strange concoction. We turned right and stumbled forward, trying to remember what lay ahead. The layout of the hospital was confusing at best, and right now, in the pitch-black abyss, it felt impossible. My heart raced as we navigated through the unknown, every step heavier than the last. Then, I heard it. A low scuffling noise from behind. I froze, half turning to see if I could catch a glimpse through the darkness. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice trembling. Sarah nodded, her face a mask of terror. "It's him. He's coming." Panic surged within me. I forced my legs to move, pushing Sarah forward. "Keep going." We dashed around another corner, colliding into a wall with a soft thud. I recoiled and quickly glanced back, convinced I'd see Jake creeping toward us, drawn by the sound. But there was nothing. Just an oppressive stillness that wrapped around us like a shroud. I took a deep breath and scanned our surroundings. I spotted a stairwell door at the end of the hall, a flicker of emergency light illuminating the yellowed exit sign above it. "There!" I shouted, pointing. "We can go upstairs." I pulled her toward the door, praying it would open easily. The handle turned, and we pushed through, stumbling onto the staircase as the faint emergency lights flickered above us. But just as we stepped onto the first flight, I felt the air changed. A chill rushed past, sending icy tendrils creeping across my skin. I glanced back into the hallway, expecting to still see the darkness pooling there, but instead there was a figure standing under the emergency light, Jake's outline sharp against the glow. "He's waiting for us," Sarah whispered, panic rising in her voice. I pushed us upward, fear propelling me as we barreled up the steps two at a time. I tried not to think about the shadows that might be chasing us, or what Jake might do if he caught up. We reached the second floor, but the hallway stretched before us like a maze. Empty rooms lined the walls, their doors ajar and inviting. "I don't see an exit up here," I exclaimed, forcing myself to keep calm, but inside I was unraveling. "Let us check one of the rooms," she suggested, her voice unsteady but resolute. "There might be a way through." I hesitated. I wanted to find safety, but every instinct screamed at me not to enter those rooms. "What if it's a trap? We can't stay here," she urged. "We've got to do something." Just as we debated our next move, the lights flickered again. A low thud echoed down the hall, and this time, I knew we weren't alone. "That's when I saw it," I breathed, my eyes widening in horror. Something was shifting in the shadows, deepening the darkness in ways I could not understand. A whisper brushed against my ear as I spun around to face the sound. "You can't leave." I wasn't sure if I imagined it, but I felt the temperature drop further, and dread coiled in my stomach. The shadows seemed to pulse, hungry and alive, as I felt both Sarah and I instinctively take a step back. I was losing focus, and the low whisper stuck in my mind, leaving a bitter taste of dread. "Let us try that room," I said, my voice shaky as I gestured toward the nearest door. It was partially open, just enough to make me feel an urge to push through. I took Sarah's hand again, and we inched forward. Inside, the room was dimly lit, and it reeked of antiseptic. Medical equipment surrounded us, machines quietly beeping, monitors displaying empty stats. My eyes landed on a gurney, its sheets crisp and white, the kind that made you feel uneasy. "This isn't right," I said, feeling the tendrils of anxiety wrap tighter around me. I stepped into the room fully and flicked the light switch. Nothing happened. The overhead bulb buzzed ominously but stayed dark. "Maybe we should go," Sarah urged, glancing back toward the door as if she wanted to bolt. But just then, a sound pierced the silence, a slow, dragging noise coming from deeper inside the room. "What was that?" I whispered, frozen in place. "I don't know. Let us go, please." Before I could respond, the dragging intensified, followed by a series of raspy breaths that seemed to rise from the shadows. I peered into the darkness beyond the medical equipment, my heart thuds ringing in my ears. "I can't stay here," I said, taking a step back. Just as we turned to flee, the door slammed shut behind us with a deafening thud. I screamed, the sound echoing off the walls, a raw, instinctual cry of fear that bounced back at us. "Open it! Open it!" Sarah shouted. We pulled the handle, but it wouldn't budge. It felt as if the room itself was alive, keeping us trapped within its confines. In a frenzy, I searched for another way out. Windows? Is there a window? I darted around the room, adrenaline spurring me on. But the only window was barred, preventing any hope of escape. Then, something caught my eye, a figure slinking into the faint light, emerging from the darkness. I squinted, trying to make it out. It was just a shape at first, but then it became clearer. A figure in a hospital gown, face obscured by long, unkempt hair. I gasped, the air hitching in my throat. The figure rose to its feet, and I could see its fingers twitching, as if beckoning us closer. The raspy breaths grew louder, almost thunderous. "Stay away!" I shouted, but my voice was drowned out by an angry piercing shriek that filled the room, making my skin crawl. And just like that, the light flickered wildly before going out entirely. We were completely enveloped in darkness. That's when I felt it, a cold breath against my neck, followed by another whisper, this time clearer and more chilling, "You should have never come here." I stumbled backward, colliding with something solid. Sarah was at my side, a frantic whisper of "What do we do?" barely escaping her lips. "Just hold on," I replied, fear gripping me. I had no clue what to do next, but one thing was clear: whatever we faced was determined to keep us there. I heard the door lock click into place behind us, and panic surged through me. I grabbed Sarah's arm tightly, and together we pressed ourselves against the wall, breathing in unison a desperate, silent prayer to whatever shadow had taken hold of our night. "Can you see anything?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "No," she replied, her voice a mere thread of sound in the thick darkness. Just keep quiet." I closed my eyes, straining my ears. The raspy breaths were still there, mingling with the pounding of my heart. Without the light, the room felt even larger, stretching out into an intimidating void. My mind raced, conjuring images of what could be lurking just beyond my reach. "Do you think we can break a window?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Or the door? We have to find something." Sarah replied, her breath hitching in a gasp. Suddenly, the dragged sound returned, echoing like a chant through the air. It came closer, a slow, deliberate movement. I felt a chill creep down my spine. "We can't just stand here," I said, the urge to flee battling with the immobilizing fear. "We have to do something." A soft whimpering broke the silence. It was low and pitiful, drawing my attention. "What's that?" I asked, squinting into the dark. "It's coming from over there," Sarah said, her voice thin, trembling. I could barely make out her silhouette, but I felt her shift, moving cautiously toward the source of the sound. "Wait!" I hissed, but she was already inching forward. Then I saw it, a dim glow flickering in the corner, just barely illuminating a small pile on the floor. Sarah knelt down, squinting. "It looks like a doll." I joined her, and the light flickered again, revealing a small, cracked porcelain face among a scattering of dusty toys. The doll's eyes seemed to glint in the sparse light, creating an eerie contrast against the otherwise absorbed shadows. "Who would leave this here?" Sarah muttered, her voice full of unease. As I reached for it, the room trembled with another shriek, louder this time, rattling through me like thunder. I jerked back, instinctively dropping the doll. The shrieking stopped, replaced with a quiet, shadowy hum. "What did we just do?" I breathed, staring at the fallen doll as if it could answer me. Before I could react, the door rattled violently. "No! No!" I screamed, but the banging grew louder, framing us in a whirlwind of noise. A moment later, the door swung open violently, light pouring into the room. It illuminated a figure standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the brightness. I could only see the outline, but my body screamed danger. "Get back!" I shouted, pulling Sarah behind me. "Don't go!" Sarah cried as I saw the figure lunged toward us, arms outstretched. Then, in one swift motion, the light flickered out again, plunging us back into darkness. I felt hands cold, clammy hands grasping my arms, pulling me deeper into the shadows. "Help!" I screamed, dread washing over me, but it felt like my voice was swallowed by the abyss. That's when I remembered the doll. There had to be something more about it, a connection I wasn't seeing. Clarity flickered in my mind, just out of reach, as the cold continued to pull me in. In that moment, as I felt the icy hands grip tighter, a spark of intuition flickered within me. I thought of the doll on the floor, the curiosity that had drawn me to it. I needed to reach it again. They seemed to be somehow linked. Private fears mingled with an urgent hope as I fought against the grasping shadows. "Sarah!" I gasped, my voice strained and shaky. "I'll get the doll. Grab the door." I wriggled my way out of the cold clench that dared to keep me anchored to the darkness, my goal clear: reach for the light, the thing that shimmered with potential. I hooked my arm around the remnants of my sanity, reaching for the floor, my fingers finally brushing against the cool porcelain. As I clutched the doll, the clamor of the hands around me flickered, their grip weakening. A sound like a low growl rumbled from the shadows, as if the darkness itself was protesting the disruption. I couldn't waste this opportunity. Now, Sarah! I shouted, holding the doll in front of me like a shield. The whispers and screams around us receded for a moment, almost as if they feared the very object I now bore. I surged toward the door, my heart racing, pulling Sarah along with me. Just as we reached the doorway, I saw him, Jake, faintly illuminated by a flash of light, standing amidst swirling darkness, his mouth twisted in a snarl. "You can't escape!" He howled, but something about the doll momentarily stilled him. He stepped back, like he was afraid of the object I held. "Open the door!" I yelled, urging Sarah forward. As she tugged at the handle, the heavy wood wrenched back. Finally, the door gave way, and we stumbled into the hallway, panting and trembling. The emergency lights flickered with a weak, yellow glow, casting eerie shadows but offering some reprieve from the darkness we had barely escaped. But the moment was fleeting, the shadows were not far behind and began stretching toward us again, as if emboldened by their companion. "Where do we go?" Sarah breathed, glancing over her shoulder at the approaching cold tendrils, their intensity belying any safety in the dimly lit corridor. "There." I pointed down the hall, to an exit sign at the far end. "We have to reach it." We broke into a sprint, lungs burning and legs heavy with fear. The whirling shadows hissed behind us, clamoring for our escape, the disembodied whispers rising again, now louder and more frantic. Just as we reached the stairwell, another ferocious shriek echoed down the hall. I hesitated for just a moment, glancing back. Jake's face twisted in rage contrasted sharply with the menacing shadows behind him. I sensed he was summoning something, trying to tether us back to the darkness we had narrowly escaped. "Keep running," Sarah urged, and I turned to follow her lead. We lunged up the stairs, desperate to put distance between us and whatever hell he was unleashing. Each step felt like an eternity, the heaviness of dread clung to my chest. We burst onto the roof, a gust of wind throwing our hair back, pulling us into the night air. The roof of St. Clair's was a different world, steel and moonlight, surrounded by shimmering stars, a canvas bright against the dark turbulence we had just felt. "Look!" Sarah pointed toward an old maintenance ladder, rusted and creaking against the wind. It leaned precariously over the edge. "If we can get down there, we might escape the building." But even as we rushed toward it, I heard the throaty laughter echoing from behind us. Jake's piercing voice slid into the night, "You think you can run as far as you want? You're mine." I felt a chill shudder down my spine. It was as if he transcended physical barriers, the dark chill of his presence lingering even out in the open. We clambered desperately down the ladder, my heart racing but my mind caught between instinct and that awful, nagging fear that Jake and those shadows weren't finished with us yet. As we reached the ground, the night was thick with uncertainty. The shadows felt tangible, lingering just outside the edges of my peripheral vision. "What now?" I asked, breathless and on edge. "I don't know," Sarah admitted, her voice shaky as she scanned the dark expanse of the parking lot. "Do we even call for help?" And that's where I hesitated, my mind swirling with the events of the night, all the things I still have not processed. "What if they can't help us?" I whispered, a sudden unease blooming in my chest. A flicker of resolve sparked in her eyes. "We can't stay here, we have to keep moving." She jerked her head toward the street, and with a shared breath of understanding, we made our way toward the main road. But behind us, the whispers of shadows grew in intensity, wrapping around us with dark promises of things unsaid. As we walked, I stole a glance back at the towering shape of the hospital. There was something in those windows, perhaps the darkness of Jake, waiting just beyond the veil of moonlight, a phantom eternal in its hunger. I still think about that night sometimes. I've never gone back to the hospital, and I can't shake the feeling that whatever happened there hasn't officially ended. I moved to another city, away from the memories but far from any answers. Some questions linger over my head. Was it real? Was it all in my mind? What exactly had I encountered? But I keep those thoughts at bay, even if they swirl in the back of my mind like an unfinished story, tangled in shadows waiting to be unearthed.